I'll be joined by former RNC chair Ronna McDaniel in her first interview since stepping down as party chair. In full disclosure to our viewers, this interview was scheduled weeks before it was announced that McDaniel would become a paid NBC News contributor. This will be a news interview, and I was not involved in her hiring. RNC member told Politico that you were a, quote, failed chair. Another said, quote, we lost the House, the Senate, and the White House while she was chair. Did you deserve to stay on with that track record, Ronna?
You know, I push back on that very hard. You know, the fact that under my time as chair, we've had more women in Congress ever than in the history of our party, that we've had more minority growth in our party, and that didn't just happen. I had offices open in Black, Asian, Hispanic communities that we had ignored as a party, and we've seen growth as a result, which, by the way, we're seeing in this election as well. And then I'm going to point out to this. The RNC, we don't do the messaging. We don't pick the candidates. We're turnout. So if you look at 2022, just 2022, we turned out 4 million more Republicans, and we would have won the Electoral College based on that turnout. So what I say to people is, if we're building the road that all the candidates drive on, and if one candidate got to the finish line, the road wasn't the problem. It's candidate to candidate. And I can go to every race in 2022. So I view my tenure as RNC chair as a success.
All right, well, let's...
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. We got to talk about the mainstream liberal media revolting against NBC News hiring Ronald McDaniel as a paid contributor, okay? I mean, I've seen posts in which the woke revolutionaries are boo-hoo-on and crying racism, talk about how black contributors don't get paid. How did Ronald McDaniel get paid even though black people don't get paid to contribute, right? Again, we all know, right? They're going to complain. They're going to have something to say. But the main complaint is going to be about the fact that this woman worked for the RNC, and now she's getting a paid gig with the liberal media, okay? And here's my problem with it, right? My problem with it is the fact that this woman clearly is a tool of the establishment, okay? After getting ousted from the RNC for poor performance, right? Because her performance was very poor, okay? We were losing elections under this woman. I don't think that funds were being allocated properly. I think that the RNC was essentially a tool of the establishment to ensure that Republicans don't win and don't gain power, especially MAGA Republicans. Yeah, I think that she deserved it, right? But again, my criticism of her is the fact that she ran to the mainstream liberal media to save her, right? And I mean, that is evidence and proof that she is a tool of the establishment. The fact that the mainstream liberal media would accept her so quickly after she got ousted from the RNC, right? She didn't go to Newsmax. She didn't go to OAN. She didn't even go to Fox News. She went to NBC, okay? Basically the same network that has the other former chair of the RNC, Michael Steele, who basically is a Democrat, right? I mean, so, you know, we know that they're not just going to let people come on their network that are not left-leaning, okay, that are not anti-Trump. And that basically tells you everything you need to know about Ronald McDaniel, that she is a tool of the establishment. If you're not a tool of the establishment, you're not going to get this gig. So that being said, NBC decided to roll out their new establishment tool by doing this interview with Ronald McDaniel amid the backlash that they're getting. And it was a pretty interesting interview, okay? As Ronald McDaniel, as you can clearly see here in this interview, she's playing her role as the establishment contributor that ultimately is going to be used to bash Republicans, okay, to try to shit on Trump, because that is what they want her to do ultimately. And that is the line of questioning that she was getting from Kristen Welker the whole interview. We already know what they wanted to talk about. They want to talk about January 6th. They want to talk about the election. And that's the questions that they gave her.
Right, well, let's talk about the election now. Donald Trump says one of his first acts, if he is reelected to a second term, would be, quote, to free those charged and convicted of crimes related to January 6th. Do you support that?
I want to be very clear. The violence that happened on January 6th is unacceptable. It doesn't represent our country. It certainly does not represent my party. We should not be attacking the Capitol. We should not be having violence. I said it that day. I put a statement out that day that this is not acceptable. If you attacked our Capitol and you have been and you've been convicted, then that should stay.
So then, but to the question though, do you disagree with Trump saying he's going to free those who've been charged and
I do not
convicted?
think people who committed violent acts on January 6th should be free.
So you disagree with that? He's been saying that for months. Ronna, why not speak out earlier? Why just speak out about that now?
When you're the RNC chair, you kind of take one for the whole team, right? Now I get to be a little bit more myself, right? This is what I believe. I don't think violence should be in our political discourse, Republican or Democrat. And I disagree with that. I agree with him on a whole host of other things. Let's close the border. Let's make sure we have good incomes for people. Let's make sure we do a lot of great things. But on that point, I don't think we should be freeing people who violently attacked Capitol Hill police officers and attacked the Capitol.
Ronna, that beyond the call that we were just discussing, the RNC helped the Trump campaign assemble fake electors in Michigan, provide a platform for Trump lawyers to hold that news conference with Rudy Giuliani alleging a global conspiracy to rig the election against Trump, and you yourself called the election rigged multiple times. Did you enable Donald Trump to spread election lies?
Let's go back to time.
But
initially in November of 2020, there were concerns everywhere. Imagine you saw videos being put out, all types of things. You have to track that down. So where I was in 2020 and the quotes that are being taken from a very long time ago, 3.5 years ago, to where I am today, you've got to allow the process to play out. And I think it is fair to say there were concerns then, but no, Biden is the president, and we need to move forward, and this is important for our country.
Ronna, I think what people struggle with is by the time January 6th happened, all of those court cases, more than 60 court cases had already been litigated. Donald Trump had lost. The Supreme Court said they're not going to take up concerns. As the head of the RNC, did you not have a responsibility to say Joe Biden won?
I've said that.
At the time, before January 6th, and you're still saying that there were concerns this morning as
saying
you
there's
sit here.
Concerns about the election doesn't mean he didn't win. And that's the only thing I'm going to say. Listen, we are in 78 lawsuits right now at the RNC. I'll give you one example. One's in Montana right now with Democrats suing to say you should be allowed to be registered to vote in 2 states. Why are they suing on that? Why are you suing to allow voter ID to be removed in states? I disagree with that.
Ronna, do you, to the people who feel like you enabled Donald Trump and his lies about the election, do you owe people an apology? Do you owe this country an apology?
I think the fact that we looked at things is what Democrats have done, Republicans have done. We're allowed to look after elections and say, I want to make sure this was done in a transparent and fair way. And I certainly do not agree with violence or any attacks on our Capitol. And I'm going to be very clear, that is something I condemn wholeheartedly.
Yeah, so you see, they hear that, okay? The mainstream liberal media, tried to make Ronna McDaniel do the tap dance, right? The January 6th tap dance. Come out here and to talk about January 6th, okay, talk about a whole bunch of stuff that really, again, doesn't really have that much to do with the direction of this country because they want her to bash Trump. Ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what they want, right? They want to use her as a shield to eventually go after Trump. Now, again, she tried her best, okay? Ronna McDaniel tried her best to do the balancing act, okay, to do the tap dance. So, well, January 6th was violent. I condemn what happened on January 6th, and I don't want those violent people freed, while at the same time, you know, she tried to basically say that, well, you know, people are allowed to have different opinions, okay? She still said that she supports Trump, okay? If it's between Biden and Trump, she's going to go with Trump. But again, you know, the fact that she allowed herself to be subject to this interview, because she's desperate to be a part of the establishment, she's desperate to be on the team, is, again, where my criticism comes from, right? I think it kind of confirms what everybody was saying about her being the chair of the RNC, is that, again, she is just a pawn of the establishment, right? And I think doing this interview and going on his network as a paid contributor, running to the mainstream liberal media, is evidence of that. But like all these Republicans that run to the mainstream liberal media, they're never actually fully going to be accepted no matter what they say. And evidence of that is the fact that, again, there's so much backlash at MSNBC over her hire that she's not allowed on the show, right? Like, she's not allowed on the network. And after this interview with Kirsten Welker, Chuck Todd went on Meet the Press and trashed Ronald McDaniel in his own network for allowing her to be a paid contributor and to come on the show and to do this interview, basically saying that, hey, I still don't trust her. I do not trust her. Take a look.
Let me deal with the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
I think our bosses owe you an apology for putting you in this situation, because I don't know what to believe. She is now a paid contributor by NBC News. So I have no idea whether any answer she gave to you was because she didn't want to mess up her contract. She wants us to believe that she was speaking for the RNC when the RNC was paying for her. So she has credibility issues that she still has to deal with.
Yeah.
Is she speaking for herself, or is she speaking on behalf of who's paying her? Once at the RNC, she did say that, hey, I'm speaking for the party. I get that. That's part of the job. So what about here? I will say this. I think your interview did a good job of exposing, I think, many of the contradictions. And look, there's a reason why there's a lot of journalists at NBC News uncomfortable with this, because many of our professional dealings with the RNC over the last 6 years have been met with gaslighting, have been met with character assassination. So that's where you begin here. And so when NBC made the decision to give her NBC News' credibility, you got to ask yourself, what does she bring NBC News? And when we make deals like this, and I've been at this company a long time, you're doing it for access to audience. Sometimes it's access to an individual, and we can have a journalistic ethics debate about that. And I'm willing to have that debate. And if you told me we were hiring her as a technical advisor to the Republican convention, I think that would be certainly defensible. If you told me we're talking to her, but let's see how she does in some interviews and maybe vet her with actual journalists inside the network, see if it's a two-way, what she can bring the network. So I do think, unfortunately, this interview is always going to be looked through the prism of who is she speaking for, right? I think you did everything you could do. You got put into an impossible situation, booking this interview, and then all of a sudden the rugs pull out from under you. You find out she's being paid to show up. It's unfortunate for this program, but I am glad you did the best that you could, and that's why the three of us are on here to try to bolster that editorial independence.
Yeah, so you see that, you heard that, okay? The Trump derangement is so crazy on these liberal networks that Chuck Todd bashed his own network, NBC News, for hiring this woman, okay, and doing this interview with Kristen Welker because he does not trust her, right? These people are upset with the fact that she has ties to President Trump and the RNC's role in challenging the 2020 election results, okay? So again, these people are so upset with it that they're bashing their own network for hiring her, okay? Again, it's just amazing how that works, right? These Republicans that want to be accepted by the mainstream liberal media and the establishment, it seems like they don't understand that they will never be fully accepted, right? People like Liz Cheney, the Adam Kinzingers, okay? Unless you go full Michael Steele, which is just Democrat, or you go full Alyssa Farah Griffin, which is basically just Democrat, or full Anna Navarro, which is just Democrat, they're not going to accept you, right? And even then, because you still associate with the Republican Party, because you have Republican as your political registration, they're still gonna have questions, right? They're still gonna always give you that side eye and say that, well, you are still a Republican, even though everything you say is liberal. Even though all you do is bash Trump, right? You do what they want you to do. You do the Trump bash and tap dance, right? They're still going to have questions. And I'm telling you right now, Ronald McDaniel, she's gonna have some issues, okay? Because if she continues to try to walk this fine line, right? She didn't really bash Trump too much. Okay, but again, she did say the things they kind of wanted her to say when it comes to January 6th, when it came to the 2020 election. She ain't going to be able to get away with that, right? She's not going to be able to get away with trying to walk the fine line, okay? There's a reason why all these people, again, they basically go full-blown Democrat. I mean, these people are coming out and saying they support Joe Biden, right? They would much rather support Joe Biden over Trump, even though they claim to be Republican. So, she thinks that she could just do this and be able to kind of, walk the fine line. She ain't going to be able to do it. There is no fine line, right? You have to go full-blown anti-Trump, okay? Basically pro-Democrat, pro-Biden, or else it's not going to work, okay? They're going to run her off that network, okay? And this is what she gets, right? This is what she gets. I can't feel too bad for her because this is what she gets for running to the mainstream liberal media, begging for acceptance, right? Rather than to keep her pride and her dignity and to prove people wrong and say, you know what, I'm not a shield of the establishment. You know, I mean, she could have went to Fox News. I'm not sure if Fox News would have had her, but I'm just saying, Newsmax. Oh, wait, I'm just saying, I don't know if those are actual real opportunities for her. But going to the liberal media, going straight to NBC, I don't think that was the right move, okay? That move right there basically kind of confirmed what everybody was saying. And it's just so hilarious that the people at that network are revolting and they're rejecting her after she ran to that network to save her career. Again, it's just hilarious because unless she becomes a full-blown Never Trumper, that relationship ain't gonna last long. They're not gonna have it, right? They're not going to stand her being there. They're gonna boycott, right? They're gonna be backlashing against the network until the network gets rid of her. Okay, that's what's gonna happen. Best believe, this is not going to end well, right? This is not going to end well. But hey, let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.